Welcome back, noble one, to Whispers of the Ancient Fire. The winter grows dark and deep. The frost spirits prey on those who weep. The wolf of winter emanates light. Countless tales are there of his unending fight. The wolf arrives to protect your joy. A new folk tale for every girl and boy. Relax and take comfort, noble one, as I tell the tale of how a battle was won. In the old winters, before the rail lines stitched the east together, and before the cities decide to drown out the stars, there were nights so quiet you could hear the snow hit your nose. People in the Appalachian Mountains knew those nights well. They lived in thick wooded mountains, in small houses that leaned together as if sharing warmth. They were not wealthy. Their roofs leaked now and then. Their boots wore thin, and their cupboards held enough more often than plenty. But they had a few precious things that could not be counted in coins. A steady workday, a shared loaf, a good song, and better stories. Every winter, when the nights grew longest and the cold grew sharpest, they told it again. The story of the winter vigil and the guardian who walked the hills, the winter wolf. In one of those houses, near the edge of the town, where the fields met the first rows of pines, there lived a family, a father and mother everyone simply called Ma and Pa, and their two children, Elsie and Tom. Elsie was 10, with thoughtful eyes that saw more than she said. Tom was 8, all quick questions and scuffed boots and elbows. On this particular day, the wind had a mean edge to it. Snow had fallen and fallen again. Smoke from the chimneys went straight up into a pale, hard sky. The river below town lay under a lid of ice, thick enough to groan when you walked on it. Inside their house, the air smelled of wood smoke and bread. Ma's sleeves were rolled up as she kneaded dough at the table. Pa had come in from the woods, his coat hung by the door, his hands worn raw from splitting logs. The fire hissed and popped in the hearth. On the table, between the flour and the bowl of dough, sat a little saucer. In the saucer stood a small candle of yellow beeswax, its wick still white and waiting. Tom pressed his nose to the frosty window. "Do you think we'll hear him this year?" he asked, his breath making clouded shapes on the glass. Elsie turned the potato she was roasting on a fork over the fire. "We're not supposed to hear him," she said. "We're supposed to see his tracks in the morning." "But sometimes folks say they hear him," Tom insisted. "He'll howl, won't he?" "Sometimes," Pa said, from his chair by the hearth, "when the night is very still and the snow spirits are ripe for destruction." Tom turned. "Tell it again," he said. "Please, the whole thing, the white wolf and the snow spirits." Ma shook her head, but she was smiling. "If your father tells the whole story, bread'll never get in the oven." "It's winter vigil," Pa said mildly. "If there's a night for the long telling, it's this one." He settled into the old wooden rocker, the one that had belonged to his father before him. The wood creaked as he leaned back. The firelight warmed his face. Tom dropped to the braided rug at his feet, cross-legged, leaning forward. Elsie left the potato propped safely at the edge of the grate and came to sit beside her brother hugging her knees to her chest. Outside, the wind died away, as if it too wanted to listen. Pa looked into the flames. Then he began. Long ago, he said, before this town had a name, before there was a mill on the river or a farm on the hill, the winters were wilder. Wind didn't come politely when it was called by nature. It came like a beast, sudden and deep and hungry. Elsie had heard these words every year of her life. Still, they never felt worn out. They settled into the room like old, welcome friends. In those days, Pa went on, the cold was not just cold, it had teeth. There were spirits in it. Some folks called them frost spirits, others the demons of ice. They didn't go for fingers and toes. They went for the hearts and minds of men. They slipped through the cracks and keyholes. They curled under beds and clung to rafters. They didn't howl or shout. They whispered. Pa's voice dropped into a murmur.
There is no joy left,
they said.
There is no help coming. There will never be enough. You are alone.
Ma stopped kneading the dough to listen better. When people listened, Pa said, really listened, something inside them began to go numb. They stopped singing. They stopped sharing. They sat alone in their corners while the fire in their hearts burned lower and lower. That, he said quietly, was how the frost spirits would feast. Tom leaned closer, eyes wide. But the earth did not belong to them, Pa went on. It had a steward, the Great One. Elsie whispered to Tom. Pa nodded. In the deep places beneath the mountains, there lived one the old stories called the Bear under the mountain, the sleeping flame, the earth steward, and the Great One below all. He wasn't the creator of the world. That honor belongs to the maker of realms, the creator who hung the stars and told the rivers where to run. But the maker had given the Great One a charge, to watch over the earth, to guard its rivers and forests and creatures, and most of all, to watch over the children of the Creator, teach them the way they must live, until the day the coming light comes and set everything right. Pa's voice gentled. The Great One loved his work. He walked the hills in the shape of a great bear, his paws shaking the frost from the trees. He kept the frost spirits at bay with a glance and a growl. But there came a time when he was called to go and dwell beneath the mountain, until this day, to prepare for that coming light. He knew he could not walk the winters forever. So, before he went, he climbed the highest peak in the western mountains, higher than any human foot had ever stepped. The air up there was thin and sharp. The snow never melted. He looked out over the world he loved, the frozen rivers, the sleeping forests, the little lights of huts and tents and cabins. He called out to the maker of realms. Pa's gaze had gone far beyond the low ceiling of their house, out past the rafters to a sky deeper than winter's.
The children grow cold,
the Great One said.
The frost spirits creep closer. I must go to sleep as you ask, but who will guard the night when I am gone?
The answer didn't come as thunder, Pa said. It came as a stillness so deep, the snow itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the northern sky lit. It began as a pale shimmer, then grew into a great curtain of light, yellow, green, silver, red, and faint blue, folding and rippling across the dark sky. From that light, a shape stepped into the world. A wolf, white as new fallen snow, large as a horse, with fur that caught the starlight and eyes that held a quiet blue flame. He was no god, no little false king. He was what the Great One below had asked for. A guardian for the darkest winter nights. The Great One looked at the wolf, Pa said, and saw in him strength and patience and a kind of lonely courage.
You will walk the winters after I am gone,
he told him.
You will hunt what eyes cannot see. You will walk the long nights and drive out the frost spirits whenever they gather thick. You will guard the world until I return again and the true light comes.
The wolf bowed his great head, not with words, but with a promise all through his bones. He said,
I will obey as you wish.
The Great One laid his paw on the wolf's head, blessing him in the name of the Creator. And then he went where he was called to dwell, beneath the mountains, and watch from there. And from that day on, whenever winter grew too sharp and the nights too long, the winter wolf rose from the far north and walked these lands. The children could see him, a shadow of white and silver against the dark hills, moving over the snow without sound, breath steaming in the air, eyes like embers. But even the winter wolf, Pa said, could not do everything alone. The first time he walked, Pa continued, the frost spirits were thick as thorns. He went where the cold felt heaviest, over the plains where lonely cabins sat under wide, pitiless skies, through the forest where hunters sat in the dark and wondered if they'd live to see spring, along the ridges where the wind screamed and tore at anything that dared to stand. Wherever he went, he drove the frost spirits out. He would stand outside a house and let out a howl, not a wild and savage, but long and deep, a note that shivered through wood and stone. The frost spirits who hate to be reminded of courage would flee from it, slinking back to the deeper dark. But there was something the winter wolf could not do. He could not force a single heart to be glad. The Creator had not made him for that. Joy cannot be shoved in. It has to be chosen. Elsie's hand tightened on her knees. So the winter wolf did what he could, Pa said. He walked the hills and ridges. He scattered the worst of the frost spirits. And then, one year, he came to a village, a little like ours. Ma glanced at the window. The winter had been long there, Pa said. The river froze early. The harvest had been thin. A sickness went through the town and took more than one chair from the table. In a small house at the edge of that valley lived a widow and her 2 children. Their woodpile was low, their flour barrels scraped. Their blankets were patched until patch and cloth were nearly the same thing. The frost spirits loved that house. They curled on the beams and slunk along the floorboards. They whispered to the widow,
There is no joy left. There is no hope coming. You will never have enough. You are alone.
The widow heard those words. Her heart shook. Tears filled her eyes. But somewhere under the fear, she remembered another voice from years before, when she'd been a girl on her own mother's floor, listening to stories by the fire. She remembered the words, The Creator made us for joy, even in winter, even with little, even when things are hard. Pa's voice softened. So she did a strange thing. She got up. She went to the shelf and found a bit of beeswax she'd been saving. She warmed it in her hands and rolled it between her palms until it made a small, crooked candle. She took a little chipped saucer, the plainest dish she owned, and set the candle in it. She carried it to the window right where the frost spirits liked to press their faces. The children watched her with big, frightened eyes. Ma had gone very still at the table. Ma knew this part of the story well enough to say it with him if she chose. The widow didn't have a big fire, Pa said. She didn't have a lantern to spare, but she had a hearth, and in that hearth, she coaxed a little flame with a poker. She used that flame to light her candle. It wobbled at first. It looked as if it might go out, but it held. And then the widow did one more strange thing. She lifted her chin and spoke aloud. "Maker of the stars," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "and great one below all. We are cold and we are afraid. We do not have much, but we want the joy you made us for. Come and drive this despair away. Let the guardian you have given us pass by our door. Let him see this candlelight and know he is welcome here." She didn't pretend she wasn't scared, Pa added. She didn't lie and say they had plenty. She just asked. Tom swallowed. The frost spirits did not like that, Pa said, with a faint smile. They hate to hear anyone speak to the Maker of Realms. They hate a heart that admits its fear and still chooses to ask for peace. They hissed and shrank back from the little flame. Up on the ridge above the valley, the winter wolf lifted his head. He had been about to turn toward another place, where the cold was cruel and the hearts had nearly given up, when he saw something. Among the dark squares of roofs, one small light shone just for him. It seemed to reach. Pa held out his hand as if cupping a tiny flame. The wolf could feel the prayer in it, he said. He padded down the ridge towards the house. The frost spirits felt him coming. They see no shape, but they know the tread of the guardian. They clung to the walls, desperate to hold on. Ma's hands were white with flour, resting on the dough. Elsie could almost see the thin, mean faces of the spirits pressed on the glass of that long-ago house. The wolf stood in the yard, Pa said, snow deep around his paws. He said nothing. He did not have to. He fixed his gaze on the window where the candle burned. Inside, the widow felt a strange warmth move through her house. Not a heat that comes from wood or coal, but the warmth that comes when fear loosens its grip. Outside, the frost spirits broke and fled. They poured out through the cracks and corners and raced away across the snow, unable to stand where the guardian stood and where a heart had asked for help. The wolf did not go inside. He never does. It's not his way. He simply walked once around the house, leaving a ring of deep prints in the snow, like a circle of protection. Then he turned and went on. There were other houses, other valleys, other hearts that had not yet remembered the joy they were made for. But from that night on, Pa said, the widow and her children were not the same. They still had hard days. The wood still ran low. Their hands still cracked with cold. But when the frost spirits crept close and whispered their lies, the family would look at the candle and old saucer on the windowsill and say, "We are not alone. The Maker hears us. The winter wolf walks with us. We were made for joy." And the next year, Pa finished. When the longest night came, that little family was the first in their village to do what we all do now. They joined their neighbors in the town square. They helped build a great bonfire. They lit their candle from its flames, and they set it in their windows to say, "Come by here, Winter Wolf. See this light and know you are welcome. Cast out despair from our home. We want the joy our Maker made us for." Tom let out a breath. "So, that was the first winter vigil," he said softly. Pa nodded. "That's how the story goes." Elsie looked at the little candle on their table, its wick still untouched. "And the big fire?" she asked. "In the square. That started then too?" Ma rose, dusting her hands off of her apron. "It did," she said, taking up the tale for a moment. "They say that first year, the folks in that valley dragged every pine branch they could into the town center. They were tired. They were worried. But together they built a fire so high it touched the low-hanging clouds. They said that fire was like a little picture of the sleeping flame, the Great One's heart for the world. It was warm, watchful, and strong. "We still do it," Pa said. "We bring our pine boughs and logs. We light one big fire, and from that fire, we light our small candles." "Why from that one?" Tom asked. "Because we didn't start the joy," Ma answered gently. "We didn't make it up. It comes from somewhere higher and deeper, from the Great One, and from the one above him. Our little lights borrow from his big one." "And the wolf sees them," Elsie murmured, "and comes." "Yes," Pa said. "Not to harm the house, but to cleanse it. To drive out despair and make room for the joy that belongs there." "Will we go to the fire soon?" he asked. Ma glanced at the dough. "Soon," she said. "First this needs to rise. Winter vigil bread can't be rushed." She smiled. "Neither can stories, it seems." That afternoon, the town stirred. Bundles of pine and armfuls of branches appeared in doorways. Men and women and children trudged through snow toward the square in the middle of the village, a wide packed space between all the small homes. Elsie and Tom walked between Ma and Pa, each holding a bundle of green. The air smelled of sap and chimney smoke. Their boots squeaked in the dry snow. The sky above was already shading from pale to a soft bruised purple. In the square, neighbors greeted one another with chapped hands and tired smiles. "Cold enough for you, Jonas?" called the blacksmith to Pa, his face red under his cap. "Just enough to make the fire worth it," Pa answered, dropping their pine at the growing pile in the center burn pit. Children ran to and fro, tossing smaller branches on top. The local patriarch shaman, the spiritual leader of the village, was a thin reindeer with a massive 6-point antler. His other antler had already fallen off at the start of winter. With his kind eyes, he stood nearby in his thick caribou coat, greeting the villagers. The pile of pine and logs reached nearly twice a man's height. The townsfolk drew back in a wide circle. The patriarch shaman stepped forward. He carried a lit torch, which was quickly strapped to his remaining antler by a nearby beaver. His voice was not loud, but it carried.
"Maker of the stars,"
he said,
"and Great One, who sleeps below us all, we thank you for the light you've given us, for the flame that warmed the first hearth, for the joy you created us for. This winter has been long. Some of us are afraid. Some of us are sad. Some of us are tired, down to our bones. But we gather as our mothers and fathers did, and as the widow and her children did, to ask, let your light burn in this square, and let it burn in us. Let the winter wolf see these flames and know he is welcome in this valley. Let him pass by our houses and cast out despair."
He tilted his head and touched the torch to the pine pile. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pitch caught with a sharp whoosh and a hiss, and fire raced along the lower logs. The pine needles snapped and cracked. Smoke poured upward, then thinned as flames took hold, rising in plumes of gold and orange, dancing toward the darkening sky. Faces around the circle glowed. Elsie felt the cold on her cheeks melt away. The great fire roared higher, and for a little while, everyone was quiet, watching. Then the patriarch spoke again.
"Come,"
he said.
"light your candles."
One by one, families stepped forward. Each held a small candle, some thick and straight, some crooked, some nearly stubs. They reached carefully toward the great flames, using sticks or longer tapers to catch a bit of the fire, then touching that to their own sticks. It took time. No one hurried. When their turn came, Ma crouched low and helped Elsie and Tom hold out their family candle to the flames. The wick smoldered, then flared. A bead of molten wax formed, then began to trickle. Ma cupped her hands around the flame to shield it from the wind and stood up. Elsie and Tom stared. "It's not just our light," Ma whispered. "It's his shared with us." They stepped back into the circle, now speckled with many small flames. From above, it might have looked like a ring of stars had fallen to the snow around a little sun. The people began to sing. It wasn't all in key. It never was. "Though frost would steal our hope away, the whisper you are done. We lift our lights, we choose our joy, in him our warmth, our sun." Old Miss Calloway's voice always drowned out the others. Elsie sang too, at first softly, then stronger. As they sang, Ma felt that heavy knot of worry inside her chest about Pa's illness last week, about the thinness of the flour barrel, about what might come next. Shift just a little. Not vanish, but shift. When the song ended, the patriarch shaman lifted his head to the stars.
"Take your light home,"
he said.
"Set it where the wolf can see. Let it burn against the dark."
In a kind of quiet procession, the townsfolk began to drift away from the square. No one jostled, no one ran. It was not a parade, it was something gentler and weightier. A people carrying borrowed fire, each protecting their little flame as if something more than wax depended on it. Ma held their little candle. Pa walked close to block the wind. Elsie and Tom walked on either side, their breath making shapes in the cold air. When they reached their house, Ma set the candle gently in a candle holder on the kitchen table. The room already warmed by the hearth changed. The fire gave a broad, busy light, but the candle gave a narrow, watchful one. Pa nodded. "Let's say it," he said quietly. They gathered around the table. Ma laid a hand lightly on the saucer. "Maker of the stars," she began, "and great one below the mountain, we thank you for this light." Pa's voice joined hers. "We ask that the winter wolves see it and know he is welcome here," he said. "Let him pass by our door. Let him chase off the frost spirits that whisper in the corners. We want the joy you made us for." Unprompted, Tom cleared his throat. "And thank you," he said shyly, "for socks, and the fire, and Ma's bread, and that Pa got better, and for the story." Elsie felt her throat tighten. She hadn't planned to say anything. Just Ma and Pa usually say the final prayer before placing the candle. But then she looked at the flame, small, brave, and heard herself whisper, "And thank you that even when I'm afraid, I can ask you for joy. Help us that we are able to feel it." Silence settled over the little circle. "Amen," Pa said. "Amen," Ma echoed. "Amen," Tom mumbled. Elsie said at last, her voice small but steady. "Amen." Together, they carried the candle to the front window and set it in the center of the sill. Outside, the last of the daylight had gone. The sky was a deep navy now, pricked with a few early stars. The candle's light pushed a soft tunnel into the night. Somewhere out in the pines, something ancient and majestic was already moving. Far beyond the village in the deep hills where the pines grew close and the snow lay untouched, the winter wolf rose. He shook himself, sending a spray of crystals into the air that caught a faint starlight like a handful of diamonds. His fur was thick and white, with faint threads of silver. His paws were broad and silent. His breath left in snow plumes. He had walked many winters. He had seen rivers change their beds, forests fall and rise again, towns appear where once there had only been trees and sky. Tonight, the longest night, The frost spirits were bold. He could sense them. He always could. The wolf lifted his head. On the air, he got a familiar scent.
Pine smoke. Far off singing.
And the threat of something stronger than both.
Joy. Not yet full, but chosen. Hope thin but honest. Lights, many small, all alive.
He turned toward it. His paws made no sound, but they left deep impressions in the snow, circles so large that no farmer, seeing them in the morning, could mistake them for anything ordinary. He passed over ridges and along frozen creek beds. In one cabin, on a lonely rise, there was no candle in the window, only darkness and a dim dying fire. The frost spirits pressed up against the cracks, their whispers thick. The wolf stopped outside. He left out a low sound, not a full howl, but a note like a hand laid on a shoulder. Inside, a man sitting alone at a table looked up without knowing why. His eyes drifted to the shelf, where a bit of unused wax sat waiting, to the hearth, where a coal still glowed faintly under ash. There in the stillness, half-remembered words stirred in his mind. Not the patriarch shamans, not his neighbors, but something older, from a story his own grandfather had told. He walks for you. Light your candle and ask. His feeble hand shook as he rose. He nearly dropped the saucer, getting it down. The wax wasn't much. The flame was small. The words that came out of his mouth were clumsy, but his question was clear. "Please," he said softly, to someone he could not see. "Visit?" Outside, the wolf lowered his head in a nod no human eyes saw. He circled the house once, and the frost spirits fled as if chased by a storm. In the little village, the wolf moved from house to house, hill to hill. Where there were no candles, his tread was heavy. He did what he could. Sometimes his very presence was enough to loosen despair's grip a little, to stir someone to get up, to push another log on the fire, to remember an old song. But where a candle shone, small and steady on a sill, that was different. Those lights were like open doors. It told him, "We remember the old stories. We want the joy we were made for. Come by here." At one particular house, he paused. From outside, he saw only a window of golden light and the faint shadows of 4 figures, too tall, too small. He smelled flour and wood smoke and gratitude mixed together. A small house, honest and ordinary. He padded close enough that his breath fogged the lower part of the glass window. Inside, Elsie, who had dozed in a chair near the window, stirred and frowned, sensing something, but too deep in sleep to wake. The wolf stood there for a moment. He simply was. The great wolf in the snow, a promise kept from long ago. The frost spirits had been lurking at the eaves, waiting for a chance to slip in and whisper their lies, shrank and slid away in the dark. They knew better than to stay where the guardian stood and a candle burned. The wolf walked once around the house, setting his paws with the same care a watchman sets his steps along a city wall. A certain blow of wind and magic settled over the house, casting out all despair within. A spell of purification and balance. Then he moved on. Across the village, across the mountains, the winter wolf walked as long as the night lasted. He walked until the sky in the east began, just barely, to pale. Only then did he turn his paws back toward the deep hills and the colder north, where he would rest a while, for his work for Vigil's night was done. Morning came slowly, like someone pushing back a heavy curtain. The valley lay under a new snowfall, fresh, clean, and glittering where the weak sun caught it. Elsie woke to the smell of porridge and the sound of Ma humming in the kitchen. Her first thought was of the window. She scrambled up, nearly tripping on the quilt, and hurried to the sill. The candle was a stub now, a cooled lump of wax with a thin black wick. Outside, her breath caught. "Pa!" she called. "Ma, Tom, come look!" They came quickly. Just outside the door were prints in the snow. They were not like a dog's paw print. Each was deep and wide, big enough that even Pa's hand would not have filled it. They came from the direction of the hills, passed right by the front of the house, and went on toward the rest of the town. "He's real," Tom whispered. Pa rested a hand on each other's shoulder, his eyes wet in a way he pretended was from the cold if anyone asked. "He walked here," he said quietly. Ma nodded. "He came," she murmured. "He passed us by." Elsie pressed her palm against the cold glass window. Her chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "Did you feel him?" she asked her parents softly. Pa smiled a little. "I felt not alone," he said, "and that's enough for me." The tracks continued along the lane toward the blacksmith's, toward Mrs. Calloway's house, toward the little cabins that clung to the edge of town. Later that day, people would come out and stand in the snow, pointing, laughing, wiping their eyes, their breath puffing in front of their faces. Old Mrs. Calloway would cackle from her bench, saying, "You see? I told you he's not forgotten us. Look at the size of that paw print, little Johnny, and tell me you still think it's only dogs and stories." Children would hop from one print to the next, their boots disappearing in the impressions, shrieking with delighted fear. And all day long, under talk of chores and weather and the coming feast, there would be a quieter conversation in many hearts. He came. He passed by here. We were protected. That evening, when the light began to fade again, the town gathered once more. This time, they did not bring pine for the fire. The great bonfire had had its night. Tonight, they brought what they could for a feast. Tables were set up in the square, planks on barrels, old doors laid across sawhorses, anything that would hold a dish. Ma brought 2 loaves of the bread she'd baked the day before, a little browner at the edges than usual, but smelled heavenly. Pa carried a pot of stew. The blacksmith brought a ham. The miller's wife brought pies. A boy with red ears brought a single jar of pickled carrots, guarded as carefully as it were gold. Elsie and Tom hung back a little, taking it in. Lanterns swung from posts. The air hummed with voices. The patriarch shaman balanced on Mrs. Calloway's bench to speak. He then shook his head, and his remaining antler fell to the ground with a great clunk. Several gasps echoed. A few chuckles came from the children in the crowd, which were quickly stifled by their parents. If the reindeer could blush, his whole coat would be red. He recomposed himself and took a breath.
"Tonight,"
he said,
"we feast. We thank the Maker for warmth and food. We thank the Great One for giving us a guardian. We thank the Winter Wolf for walking the hills while we slept."
The murmur of assent passed through the crowd. Old Mrs. Calloway wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "We thank him that old bones can still feel a little joy," she muttered.
"But more than that,"
the patriarch shaman went on,
"we thank the One above for the joy he made us for. We thank him for the light that has already come in the world, and for the greater light still to come. The one who will end all winters of the heart, so that one day no wolf will need to walk, and no frost spirit will find a place to rest."
Pa's hand tightened gently on Ma's.
"For now,"
the patriarch said,
"let us live like people who expect joy."
The villagers cheered and clapped. Tom timidly walked towards the patriarch shaman and picked up his fallen antler to maybe help him put it back on. The reindeer chuckled and told him he could keep it. Plates started to be filled and refilled. Someone slipped a second slice of pie into Elsie's dish by accident. Tom ended up with gravy all over his face and didn't notice until Ma left and wiped it off. People who had little found that, in the scrum of passing plates and shared dishes, they had enough. Somewhere, someone had found a fiddle and banjo, and a thin, cheerful tune wound its way through the crowd. Some about winter, some about the maker, some about the old stories of bears under mountains and wolves in the night. Between one song and the next, Pa bent down toward the children. "Try to remember this winter vigil," he said. "The candle, the fire, the feast, they're not tricks to make the winter feel shorter. They're how we say, 'We believe we were made for joy,' and 'We believe he will come again.'"
The wolf?
Tom asked, through a mouthful, clinging to his gifted antler. Pa's eyes crinkled as he smiled. "The one the wolf serves," he said. "The great one below the mountain." Elsie looked up at the dark hills beyond the square. For a moment, she imagined she saw a white shape on the crest, watching. Then the fiddle struck up again, and someone tugged her into a dance circle. People clapped their hands, and Elsie spun and danced like she never did before. Years passed, as years do. Children who had once traced paw prints in frost on the windows grew taller. Some left the mountains, some stayed. Some told the story better than others. Some forgot for a while, and then remembered again when the snow fell and the night stretched out. Elsie grew too. She would light many candles in her life. In a small house of her own, she would hold a stub of wax with trembling fingers. This was the winter her first baby was sick, and the doctor said, "Wait and see. We can only wait and see." She would light it again years later, when her hands ached from work and Pa's chair sat empty by her fire. Each time, she would carry the flame from a great bonfire lit from many hands' pine. Each time, she would set it in her window and say words that by then had become as dear and familiar to her as her own name. "Come by here, Winter Wolf. See this light and know you are welcome. Cast out despair from this house. We want the joy we were made for." And each time, whether she heard a howl or not, whether she saw tracks in the morning or not, she would find something cold and hard inside her that shifted, even if only a little, towards warmth. Her children would ask for the story. She would tell it. Sometimes she would add a bit. Sometimes she would forget a detail. Stories grow that way. But she always kept the heart of it. The great one under the mountain. The creator above the stars. The wolf in the snow. The widow and her candle. The fire in the square. The tracks in the morning. And always, always, the joy they were made for.